listening to Tapped In, Buncombe County's half hour to empower on WRES 100.7 FM in Asheville. Listen up and get tapped into local important resources, information, and topics. Learn more about the topics of today's show at buncombecounty.org. Okay, it's time to get tapped in. Well, hello, and greetings to all of you folks listening to my voice. This is Tapped In, and I am one of your hosts, Zakia Bo Rogers and
Leonard Jones.
And I come to you from Communications and Public Engagement Department of Buncombe County. Not all heroes wear capes. We happen to be named after it.
So joining us today are two guests, Heather Bauer, Executive Director of Council on Aging in Buncombe County, and also Edward Jones, Family Caregiver Specialist with Land of Sky. As if you haven't heard, November is Caregiver Month, and we want to have a discussion around caregiving and the support and resources for caregivers in our community. This is one of the goals of the Age-Friendly Action Plan for Buncombe County, and you may be wondering what is the Age-Friendly Action Plan for Buncombe County. And before we dive into caregiving, just this action plan reflects the priorities and goals and actions that will help Buncombe County become an age-friendly community where older adults are safe, well, and engaged. Currently, 27% of our population is age 60 plus, and 20% are age 65. However, many age-friendly actions described in this plan have had significant positive impact on Buncombe County residents and visitors of all ages. So I would like to, again, welcome Heather and Edward to our conversation.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you for having us here today.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourselves, just so we can let our listeners know about the folks that we were working with?
Yeah. I'm Edward. I'm the Family Caregiver Specialist at Land of Sky, and so I oversee the funding for family caregiver programs throughout a 4-county region, Buncombe, Madison, Hendersonville, and Transylvania counties. And so I fund organizations like what Heather's part of with the Council on Aging to provide necessary and really supportive services to family caregivers.
Yeah. And as Edward said, I work with family caregiver programming as part of my current role at Council on Aging. We have a family caregiver specialist as part of our community service team. I came to Council on Aging in 2020 after a 13-year career in home care and became really a subject matter expert in caregiving and Alzheimer's disease and other dementias and falls prevention. Had a lot of opportunities to work with people in their home, hear their stories, get a chance to better understand their needs and what's most important to them. And have been a part of this age-friendly community. So as you stated, Leonard, as a Buncombe County age-friendly community, that includes a lot of collaboration and coordination. And so I'm really happy to be a part of some of those working groups that are part of this big age-friendly tent. Caregiver Advisory Council, Dementia Friendly Western North Carolina, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. And so one of my first questions is, what actually is a caregiver, and what do they provide?
Yeah, caregiver is anyone who provides basically unpaid care to a family member or to another loved one, a relative of some kind. And so the care that they provide kind of depends on what the individual needs. In extreme cases, it could be from like bathing and feeding someone to just help them get out of bed and getting to use the restroom to bathe, and just really getting around as much as they can within the community to get out and about and still have a life, even though for whatever reason they face challenges that are making it more difficult.
Yeah, and so I think when we ask ourselves what is a caregiver, a lot of times caregivers don't even know that they're a caregiver. They may not label themselves that way. They might just be helping schedule an appointment or, thinking I'm going to take mom to the doctor, and becomes a part of who they are, what their culture is, how they were raised. Maybe there was an expectation, maybe grandmother was living in the house. Maybe you married someone who you knew already had a chronic condition. So there are a lot of different flavors of caregiving with the natural unpaid caregivers that are out there. Most are women, and many are caring for spouses, over 44%. And then there are another about 40% caring for aging parents. And then, of course, there are those who are caring for children with disabilities or other family members.
And I think that that's so important to understand that there are so many different levels. And sometimes people can become a caregiver to someone and then that person gets better,
Mhm.
right? So, and as you said, somebody with a chronic disorder, like say if you had a really extensive surgery that took you 6 months to heal from,
Mhm.
your spouse or children or someone may become your caregiver. So it's very different levels of caregiving.
Absolutely, yeah. The short-term needs, sudden illness, we experienced a lot of that, of course, during COVID, and the considerations that we have of how long do people serve as caregivers. And so there are some statistics about that where that shows that only 30% provide care for less than a year, 24% provide care for more than 5, and 15% for more than 10. So we know, like, for instance, dementia can be a long process. In some case, 20 plus years, someone could live with Alzheimer's disease. So what does that really look like? And I think for clarity's sake, there are unpaid caregivers, but there are caregivers who are getting paid to do that work. And there are different ways that caregivers can be paid to provide that care. And we have a whole home care spectrum of formal service available. So we use this word caregiver sometimes interchangeably.
And so for those folks who are caregiving children with disabilities, and there's a large spectrum of different type of, they can be physical, mental, emotional, so many different ways. Just to talk about that, like as they get older and the parents get older, are there programs like to help someone who their parent may pass to transition them into another care?
I'm not aware of programs that address that specifically as far as like that part, but there is we call it grandparents raising grandchildren. And like how many times now it's even like a growing number of caregivers in that realm, where all of a sudden a grandparent thought, hey, I'm all set.
Yes.
My child has grown up and all that, and then before I know it, they have a grandchild at their door, needing attention and needing to be raised, short-term, long-term. And so we do have what we call a kinship caregiver program, where we can offer respite for the grandparents, and also like in the form, especially like with summer camps, which is really valuable. And also with other supplemental services, some help with school supplies and clothing. And even if HC, like Council on Aging, can't help someone directly, there's plenty of resources within this community that they can refer to, and to help them kind of overcome like the, oh my gosh, what do I do?
We've seen a lot of grandparents who are needing support for themselves and also support and caring for their grandchildren. So although I don't have statistics on that, the program that Land of Sky facilitates through Council on Aging as the service provider allows us to help with camps, with clothes, and with other resources that might come up. I want to just kind of quickly go back to that. We're talking about caregivers who are maybe in the home or in the same community, but I don't want to neglect the long distance caregivers as well. So you know that this area attracts a lot of retirees. People will come to Asheville to spend the rest of their years in Buncombe County. And so sometimes that means that adult children and other family members are still in other places. So what does that mean for them as they're concerned about their aging parent or another loved one who comes here, especially when things change?
And so that just brings me to the question that we mentioned earlier, where like it can just happen overnight, like accidents or a health emergency just pops up. Can y'all, with just from y'all expertise, do y'all have any like just some pre-planning that if you're sitting in a situation, you know, you may have aging parents, or any kind of strategies for community to know that things may be good right now, but what are some things I probably should be thinking about just in case?
The biggest thing really is to make sure that there are others available, because it's not like if something would happen to the caregiver or to the child who would be in charge, what happens? So it's good to have like a list of people that are aware of the situation. Another thing is to have in writing a current list of medications, who are doctors, if there's any kind of legal things, there's like power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, kind of have those things set up, so that when the time comes of like when a doctor goes, okay, who's in charge here? they'll know who to consult, and it's important to know what people's wishes are, like advanced directives of any kind. Any information is better than no information.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's the hardest part, right? Starting the conversation.
Well, I think people are so afraid of the conversation, because anything with changing of life that's not considered normal is scary. Like getting old, and then like when you have to plan for, like, my husband and I did our will, planning for wills, planning to after death, and where do your stuff go, and it's just like I don't want to deal with it. But then if you don't, I mean, you basically just end up with a huge mess. So I think it's so great there's so many programs that help you walk through that as well. So can we talk a little bit more about in-home caregivers? Do they have to attend classes to become a caregiver, or like any specific special certifications?
Great question. So Zakia, you're asking about in-home paid care, correct?
No, just in-home caregivers in general. Like if you're in your, like, say, if my mom was still alive and she fell ill, would I have to like become like trained to get to take care of her, or is this just something I would do?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So no, most family caregivers are not receiving training.
Okay.
And there's certainly no requirement of that, because it just becomes part of the day-to-day lives for many. There are some training options available depending on the level of care that's needed, but that is one of the gaps that we so often face.
Yeah, there are a couple of things you go to, like there's a Powerful Tools for Caregivers class, which is I think like about 6-week training program that helps caregivers. It's like in a small group, and also you have facilitators for it. It's been online. They're trying to get it back in person in the region. And there's also NC Caregiver portal that is nc-caregivers.com, and it's a free online resource for caregivers, and it covers a wide range of topics that caregivers are experiencing, and like short little lessons that they can read through that covers a lot of different topics, current information, and has videos from renowned experts such as Siba Snow. All of that is free for people to go to look up and to learn some basics about caregiving.
And what was that website you gave again?
It's nc-caregivers.com.
Thank you.
There's also a caregiver college through a local organization that focuses on individuals with cognitive impairment and their caregivers. The organization is Memory Care, and they do a caregiver college. We find that some of the best resources for caregivers, being that their experience is going to be individualized, is through first identifying as a caregiver, and of course second making that call. Like being willing to explore what options are out there can be daunting, because it's another task, right? So it's another something that they've got to do and find a way to fit in. So we like to consider ourselves as that no wrong door point of entry. Like if you call Council on Aging, we can help you navigate some of those resources that are out there. There are a lot of support groups. Some are going to be focused on Parkinson's disease or Alzheimer's disease. Others are not going to have that same focus, and they might be more general to whatever that caregiver needs. So one of those caregiver needs that comes up so frequently is the need for connection and the need to recognize that they're not alone. So there's a lot of social isolation among older adults, but that also translates to caregivers who are at increased risk for heart disease and depression. If they're caring for a spouse with Alzheimer's disease, the risk for mortality increases as they age. So there's just a large number of people out there who are providing some level of care. Maybe they're going to work and they're facing what we call presenteeism. They're there, but they're not totally there because they're worried or they're trying to take care of all these tasks. So just again, being able to start that conversation can lead down a path to helping get those very individual needs met as well. And that's really our goal, right, Edward, to better understand what they need as a person at that time in their life. Home care can be very challenging physically. So the two most common reasons that someone might need care is because of a cognitive impairment or a mobility issue. And so then those caregivers come into play, and without the skills training for, say, getting someone on and off the toilet or in and out of bed, or how to communicate well with someone living with dementia, how to address some of those challenging symptoms, both behavioral symptoms and cognitive executive functioning symptoms related to this type of disorder. So again, there are many variables about what brought them to caregiving in the first place, but there's certainly a great toll that it can take without reaching out and getting connected with some resources.
And so I heard you earlier, Edward, mention the word respite. And so when you talk about some of the challenges that caregivers have, a lot of people need just they need a break or some kind of self-care for themselves to be the best for their family members that they're caring for. So can you just give us more detail for the listeners about what is respite and what are some of the services to just help people to allow that moment to have that self-care?
So respite is the time to get away a little bit, and so it can be, you can go to like the Council of Aging, the Family Caregiver Program, and they'll have like they'll be able to help out, cover the costs to have a caregiver come in, so they have time so that they can sit with someone, their loved one, and get away to do your self-care that you need, or just to get a little break. And there's also agencies like they have like Mountain Care, they have adult daycare that you can go to, and they have like you go and you leave your loved one there for basically the day, and they have like snacks, they have all kinds of activities through a day, exercises, whatever they're capable of doing, and it's a wonderful program. And also too, respite doesn't have to be something that is very formal. A lot of it can be through another family member or a community member, like your worship community, maybe someone at work. Or so it's just volunteer and say, hey, would you like some time off? I can sit with your loved one for a couple hours on a Saturday or an evening or something, so you can get away with your spouse, have dinner together or something.
And we want getting away to be fun, right? And sometimes it is. And sometimes it's simply so they can go to the doctor themselves. Or maybe it's because there's a wedding coming up out of town and, they're trying to arrange for appropriate service at home because they're concerned about leaving the care recipient at home. But sometimes it's just to take a nap. So there are a lot of different ways that takes form, and it shapes on how long you've been caregiving, the extent of what you're doing for your loved one at home. And again, what your needs are, because a lot of people caring for other people are older adults themselves. So what does that mean? They're at increased risk for falls. They are likely suffering from at least one chronic condition, if not more than one. And so part of the resourcing is also addressing other needs, nutritional needs, transportation needs, cost savings needs. That's a biggie, that financial security. Caregivers, back to your question earlier about preparing to care, there are only 4 kinds of people in this world, says Rosalind Carter. Those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who need them. And so back to that self-identification piece, most people call us in an emergency. When do you need help? I needed it yesterday. And so unless you have someone telling you, like, let's develop a plan B, or have you thought about, sometimes that might be the last thing on your mind. So really thinking about what aging in place and aging in community means to you can help you prepare for yourself and others. As Edward said, like advanced directives, using what might be called the 5 wishes form is a great place to start. Checking out some of the online resources. Preparing your home safety. Zaki mentioned it earlier before we started the show. I mean, that's where falls are most likely to happen. This is where things can happen that can change your life overnight. So preparing that environment and really taking a look at what's needed for safety, safety first, right? And what's important to you. Do you want to be able to spend time with your grandkids, go out on a hike, hang out with your community at the block party, whatever it is? Like, where do you go to get your soul fed? What's most meaningful to
And
you?
I think a lot of things, like, people don't think about, like, house, like, if you buy the house of your 20s may not be the house of your 60s and 70s. people don't think about dishes, putting glasses up high or heavy pots and things like that. And as you get older, you're not as flexible as you once were, and that can cause accidents. So it's so many things just walking around your house and assessing everything that goes on in your world. The car you drive, that sports car that you got in your 30s when you were halfway to retirement may not be so gentle on your knees at 75 if you make it there. So when we talk about respite and self-care for our folks, what are some types of self-care would you do? Like, we have some folks who are listening right now and maybe they just need an idea. What are some self-care ideas?
Probably one of the biggest is to make sure they get some sleep.
Oh yeah.
To schedule time for sleep. Another thing is to, I think also like with the mental, like how do you approach caregiving? Because at times, and honestly, it can become so overwhelming and almost like resentful. And so it's like to always see the person caring for your spouse or whoever it is, like, or your parent, as a gift. And like, okay, it may be a hard time, but it's time with them. And it's an act of love. And that love isn't always so fun, right? Love is also a sacrifice. And like say, hey, this is a sacrifice of love for my loved one. Because I think when you have like the right kind of the mindset, then it becomes, okay, yes, I'll gladly do this for you. Yes, you asked me what temperature is outside for 100th time. I'll tell you for the 200th time. And I think those are a couple big things. And also knowing your limitations. You don't have superpowers. You're capable of more than you think you are, but you still have your limits. And it's recognizing those and knowing when to ask for help and having like a list of people that you can ask, hey, can you help me drive my loved one to a doctor? Can you come in and sit with my loved one for a little bit? Leaves are falling. Can you come over, Ray? Simple things like that.
Yeah, and I always go back to it depends on the individual. What's gonna work for you might not work for the next person. But you said, hey, not all heroes wear capes, and that's how we address caregiver support. We see caregivers as heroes, by day, by night, and however that looks for them. The days are long, and so we encourage what we call the continuation of the role by accessing help from outside of you, and whatever refills you. Again, that could be going out into the garden, it could be going to a concert, it could be going just to sit in quiet outside and listening to the leaves rustle. So there are a lot of different ways that you can refuel, but you have to have that sense of confidence that your loved one's taken care of. Otherwise that worry is going to eat you up. So really, again, that continuation of the role, what I mean by that is if you're an adult daughter caring for a parent, you want to continue that daughter relationship to the greatest extent possible. And you shouldn't be expected to have all of the answers that a professional might have. You shouldn't be expected to go through all the different training that's available. And maybe caregiving isn't right for you. And so that's the other piece. Some people become caregivers forcefully and others will become caregivers gracefully. And sometimes it's a little bit of both. So I again, back to your question, what's going to work as a suggestion for me whenever I've been in a caregiving mode, what really works for me in the moment is a breath and stepping away if I can't otherwise fully leave. Maybe it's just going into the other room for a minute. Maybe it's turning on my favorite song. Maybe instead of reacting, it's just slowing down and realizing, okay, this is a learning experience for me. This is just a moment in time. I'm gonna get through this. But then it could be bigger stuff too. Like I love to go drive my Jeep. I love to go to the beach. I love to go hiking. So what do you love and how can you fit that in?
I know.
I'm
sorry.
No, Tag, I'm in. I want to go. It's my turn.
I was just thinking.
No, Leonard, it's my turn. Okay, so I have a really good one because I'll forget because I'm aging right now. So
we all are.
Yes. So my thing is like if you have someone, exercise is so good. It keeps your brain sharp. It keeps your body sharp. and flexible and all those things. So I would encourage someone who is a caregiver to, walk. If you're having to lift your family member, stretching, do all of those things to keep your body precious, because you don't want your caregiving position to end and now you need the care.
That's a great point, and it doesn't work for everybody, because that might just feel like, hey, this is something that I have to do. And yes, exercise is great. I'm not saying that should not be part of your self-care. But start small. Start with what you can do. And when we think about a priority and when we think about an action plan, what's gonna work is what you're actually gonna do. And so hopefully it'll lead to something that will get your heart moving, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to exercise, that's excellent because it does help with blood flow, circulation, it helps clear your mind, reduce that stress. I mean, there's so much relatability to depression and just that lack of get up and go. And as you said, there's a physical strain to caregiving at times, not always, because there are emotional and mental tolls that sometimes are even more visible. But again, whatever you're gonna do, just do it. So for me, I'm not a big exerciser, but I'll get there if I can do, take a breath first or go out and do something fun. Then I'm more likely to wanna.
And I don't know if I really have a question. Just reflecting on what Edward said, that it's an act of love, and so just challenging the listeners out there that even when you think of caregivers and the act of love, think of those who are caregiving and your act of love towards them. So you may not be involved, as you mentioned, maybe the daughter's taking care of the parents, but it may be brothers involved. So just even for our listeners out there, think of the act of love, think of that individual who's sharing that love for whoever needs the care at the time, but just that act of love. And that's one of the things, just want to sit out with community. Check on those who are caregiving in the community and having that opportunity.
Okay, well, I just got the signal, the Batman signal that we need to work. But I want to say, just ask us one last question. How do we, as family members, community members, support the caregiver? What do we do?
That's a great question. The first thing is to listen. Listen, and to listen without judging, and to listen without commenting on one's own experience. Oh, I know exactly how you feel. Oh, please don't say that. And just acknowledge, like, even if you can relate, just say, I'm hearing you, I'm with you. Another thing is to ask for how can you help specifically. If you need help, call me. You're never gonna get a call. But would you like a meal prepared? Would you like me to sit with your loved one? Do you need me to go to a store or to a drugstore or pick something up? Can I help out with cleaning the house? Simple things, helping with laundry, or just like any specific thing that you feel like you can offer, ask them.
And recognize them. I think it takes a lot of patience, and it's important to recognize them. So we work as a professional community to recognize caregivers. But even when you're out in your community, at the grocery store, at the bank, in your pharmacy, in your church, you're going to see this. In Western North Carolina, 56,000 family caregivers, 20,000 people living with dementia. You're going to see this.
Wow. Maybe
Maybe it's just a smile, a kind word, saying thank you. I've seen that a lot just in the line at a retail store. It becomes, once you really start looking around you, you're going to see this.
Okay. All right, so we're having to wrap this up, so I'm gonna allow everyone to give just some advice or something they feel that's very important, a number or anything they feel is very important to leave our listeners with.
I think with caregivers, safety is really important, and especially those with that care for loved ones with dementia. Be aware of things like with electricity, fires, stoves. If your loved one has dementia and they have to have firearms in the house, lock those up or get them out of the house. Try to avoid any unnecessary accidents or so, because things, like you mentioned sometimes, things can happen in an instant. And so the safest can be, the better.
And I just encourage y'all to make the call. Call Council on Aging. We're there Monday through Friday during regular business hours, 828-277-8288. Again, that's Council on Aging of Buncombe County. We have free support groups. We can also help direct you to other services in the community. So we provide much care ourselves, and we'll also connect you with others. So again, 828-277-8288 or online at coabc.org.
And I know today we talked about caregiver well-being, again, but that's a part of Buncombe County's age-friendly action plan. And so if you're looking for some resources and some organizations with our community, I strongly encourage people, if you're able to go out to buncombecounty.org, and under social work services, age and adult services, you can find the age-friendly plan as well as information and a telephone number to contact if you have any challenges or just want to find out information from our intake. And that number is 828-250-5800. But strongly encourage you to look at this action plan that Buncombe County has designed to help people that are age-friendly here in Buncombe County. And that's again at buncombecounty.org under social work services, our age-friendly action plan.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. As I wrap up, I think about our plan to age friendly. At times we think of friendly and it's a smile, it's a hug, it's a handshake, it's a puppy licking your ankle and all those great things. But when you put age friendly in front of it, it means that we're preparing a community where you can get the support you need. And not we're going to make it easier for your knees when you get 60. So we may have some great programs. So as we age, let's take a time to enjoy and be thankful for the things we do have. Whether you're a caretaker, caregiver, the loved one, or a person who is starting to transition to our older years. We talked about respite and working out or exercise and all those great things. Well, to stand up, it takes 200 muscles. That's a lot of muscles. To raise your hand, it takes 30 muscles. To write, it takes 43. Now, if you go and exercise your right to vote, put all that exercising and movement together, and you will burn a ton of calories. This week we started our early voting, and that starts on 10/20/22, and it runs until November 5th. And we will then have our actual election day on 11/8/22. This is a time to give back and a time to realize that those that you're caring for, you're actually helping them as well, because a lot of decisions are made at the polls. With love and peace, let's age friendly together. Buncombe County.
Thank you for listening to Tapped In, Buncombe County's half hour to empower, here on WRES 100.7 FM in Nashville. Learn more about today's topics at buncombecounty.org. Otherwise, stay tuned for more great episodes coming up.